Hello and welcome back to my YouTube channel for today's video all about the ACCA SBL examination for the December 2024 sitting, the company Rodnim events. My name is James, welcome to my YouTube channel where above you can see my exclusive SBL notes, and this is part one of a series taking you through them top to bottom. So if you'd like access to my notes, click the link in the description of this video and you can download a copy fully for yourself. It's definitely going to help, especially if you've got the exam coming up in December perhaps. I'm also delighted to say that I'm associated and affiliated with Astranti, where again, if you click a link down below, you can access mock papers, pre-seen packs. These can be the difference in getting you that 50 plus. And for pure transparency, as always on the channel, if you were to click any of those affiliate links, I'd be entitled to a small percentage which goes to supporting the channel. So as ever, a massive thank you for all of your support. Now let me take you through and let's get stuck into today's video, going through the first parts now straight away. And if I was in your shoes, this is what I'd do. First of all, on the contents page on the left-hand side, you've got to come up with a mechanism of breaking down these notes. There's a lot of pages on here. Again, if you've downloaded my notes, they'll definitely help you out to save some time. But you can see there, break it down per the contents page. So introduction, Harland's events, management industry, overview. And then when you go through the notes yourself, actually pick up on, well, what did I think about that section? What was particularly important? And make sure as you're going through my notes on the screen, everything underlined is a key point, key term, key figure, or element that could link to a set requirement in the SBL examination. I've also put on the left-hand side in the introduction and content some areas that are imperative for you to be aware of, to have in the back of your mind, that the SBL exam can cover a variety of topic areas, but the likes of agency theory, stakeholders will definitely be on your exam, either them being internal or external. Agency theory, I think, could link into the actual setup of this business. We'll come on to in terms of Rodnim, where they're currently in a partnership, but could potentially incorporate to an LTD or a PLC, and therefore having shareholders and agents, or should I say principals and agents. And that is where agency theory could be linked into some of your arguments. CSR, again, could be tested because we've seen environmental and sustainability factors mentioned in the case study notes, and we'll come on to those later on. I've also included the professional skills marks areas. They mention it in the external examiner's reports for SBL. Students tend to do the worst on skepticism, definitely, and commercial acumen. So skepticism, questioning the requirement, posing an insight as to how is that the case? What is that issue? That is what the marker is definitely going to be looking for. And commercial acumen is applying your knowledge of SBL back to the scenario, which in this case is the events management business. Do that by applying Rodnim's actual name itself, where they operate in Harland. And that's where the notes, as you can see on here, every place or person is highlighted, making it easy to find. Analysis, communication, evaluation tends to be done reasonably well because you're balancing an argument for and against, pros and cons, sort of SWOT analysis, strengths and weaknesses on there. Last but by no means least, do not overlook the ACCA Code of Ethics, integrity, objectivity, professional behaviour, professional competence and due care and confidentiality. Ethics will be on your examination. There isn't too much as you're going through the actual pre-seen notes. There are little hints on there. However, I think it could be an area that comes up in the requirement that you are going to have to be proactive on. And if it does come up, apply it to the scenario and utilise those codes of ethics, being very specific and linking it back to the event that it's referring to. Now, coming on to the introduction paragraph, what was important on here? Well, of course, we've got Rodnim on there, their events management business based in the country of Harland. That is critical as to we don't want to be referring to them as it or they, or not getting perspective, because for your notes to get down, we have Harland on there is where Rodnim operates, and then we're also given later on in the notes the global figures as well, so make sure you don't get mixed up on that. Rodnim, well established 6 years ago on there. Again, opportunity for growth. They're really an emerging company, but also face challenges of competition. And to get around that, they've got to specialise and have a competitive advantage managing events, and they specialise in corporate and private clients. The private clients tend to be a bit smaller, and the key thing for your notes you'll see later on in the recording is that they do not currently target or have any business to do with the public sector. So again, an opportunity for a SWOT analysis there. They're in the growth phase of the business life cycle and have 2 founders. Again, we'll come on to in the partnership, but for this part of the pre-seed notes, it is critical you get down that they are a partnership rather than a limited company or a PLC. There is risk attached to that, but the reason why they've done it is so they could maintain control of the overall business. However, that could link into a variety of different issues and areas. Number one, fundamentally being that in a partnership, you have what is known as unlimited liability. Therefore, the owners, also known as the partners, there are 2, if they were to rack up debts or have a fine or a potential lawsuit, they are liable for those debts from their personal finances. It also gives opportunity for the market to test you on the likes of capital structure on there, maybe liquidity issues and decision-making processes. But that is the introduction. Who'd have thought you could get quite so much out of basically 2 to 3 sentences? Now coming on to the whole events management industry itself, and you've got to understand and apply this back to the local market conditions, economic stability, cultural preferences. These can all link into a pestle model analysis, for example, on there. And the brand is key to compete against the larger competitors. The competitors we'll come on to later on, but just for your notes now, Rodnim is not one of the large competitors. They're a small competitor, and therefore you'll see in the underlying notes, there are certain aspects that the clients are looking for when they're deciding which business to pick in order to actually provide the events they're looking for. So in terms of the overview, as you can see on there, normally for a planned or specific purpose, again, you can read this through. I'm just going to highlight the key aspects on here. Larger events include corporate conferences and the music festivals, whereas smaller events on the other side actually are weddings and maybe private individuals. So a variety of different stakeholder groups is the key thing for you to get down and refer back to. How are they going to manage it? In other words, the larger the event, the greater the commission, but the more hassle it is to actually organise. Then we get on to the expectations of an events management business and the clients they deal with. And an events management business is responsible for ensuring that all aspects of the event run smoothly and that the event meets the objectives of the client. This links into what is known as the NPS score on page 11. In other words, would the clients recommend us? Are they satisfied? And sadly, in Rodnim's case, this has been going down year on year for the past 3 years. Then we come on to the actual fee structure itself on here. Events management businesses charge a fee to clients for managing events, and any revenue generated from the event itself is kept by the client. Therefore, we have different models on here. We have a fixed fee model, making cost management a massive key to success, rather than saying, did it perform very well? In other words, if you're given a fixed fee, then you've just got to keep it under that fee from a cost perspective to make it actually viable. We're then going to come on to the different types of events, starting with a larger event now. And key bit for your notes here, a larger event, you're asked by the client to tender. And that means basically saying, okay, if you're tendering for an event, you're going to tell us what you can do for us. What is your cost? What is your plan for doing it? And the key 3 elements that I've noted down here is for that event at the tender stage, they have to, in this case, Rodnim or whoever's pitching for the clients, is all about managing the services and the fee they would charge. Those are the 3 key elements of the tender. And when it comes to the actual awarding of the business management tenders, the tender is most acceptable to the client is usually picked. So in other words, you've got to build a rapport and actually getting to know the client individually. And the key bit on page 11 of the notes is Rodnim only has a 45% tender success rate, which is pretty low on there. They want value for money, differentiated, and something that is going to provide value to the event they host. Now, for your notes, this is where we get onto global figures, and we're at the revenue part of the financial statements. That's sales, turnover. That in 2003, the events business, shall we say, or I was going to say the events industry globally, had a turnover, a revenue of $1,960 billion on there, with an estimated 11% annual growth for each of the next 5 years. In other words, that is fantastic. It's a growing industry, opportunity for Rodnim, but the flip side of that, that is where you get other competitors going, there's a lot of growth in this market. I think we could tap into it. In terms of the events management business now, what they charge, well, it's between 35% to 40% of event ticket sales in fees for managing events, making it financially lucrative and a very competitive industry. Corporate clients and smaller private clients, in other words, what Rodnim deals with, are normally charged a fixed fee negotiated in advance. Now, this is where you read into that and you go, we've got an events management business charges 35% to 40% for event ticket sales, which is a variable amount of fees. But I would interpret that as that is a corporate event for a corporate client. So the corporate clients, you can charge a fixed fee for them, plus you get a variable fee depending on how many turn up to the event. Whereas the smaller private events, they're just charged that flat fixed fee negotiated in advance, less flexible. And we've been told that there's a risk of some of them in the past have actually been loss-making on page 10 for you to have a look at. So it's hard to estimate those future ticket sales in terms of setting the fees and tendering. A revenue model of fixed fees and a percentage base is the most lucrative, and you'll see it later on. The corporate events are more profitable for Rodnim. Moving on to now the events management in Haaland. Haaland is a large, prosperous, economically advanced country. Again, you could fit that into your pestle analysis. Competitive events is very highly competitive in there from a management industry perspective. They operate locally and nationally and have some international reach. Again, opportunity-wise for a SWOT analysis. And the Haaland events management market is dominated, key phrase here, by 4 major companies. We are not told who they are, but if you look on page 6, we are told that Rodnim is small and not one of them. These large companies take up around 74%. Again, we don't know what the breakdown is of that, if it's sort of, 15, 20% here and sort of equally split, but it's measured by fee income. And the remainder of the market share, which Rodnim falls into, is between many small events management companies. So consider this linking it to barriers to entry, the players in the market. And when we come on to the revenue generated by events in Haaland in 2003, being $108 billion, this is where Porter's 5 forces is sort of hinted at here to determine the intensity of the competition in Haaland, and you could pull into play one of the actual models. This is where from that $108 billion, with the events management business in Haaland earning around $39 billion in fees from managing these events. As you can see just above me now, I'll scroll it up, we have a few figures based on the figures we've been actually given in the pre-seed materials. And I've taken the actual fees earned in Haaland and divided it by the actual revenue. And that's where we've got 36.11%, which fits in between the charge that we've seen up at the top in terms of between 35 and 40%. So bang on in terms of what you'd be expecting from a variable perspective. But then we can look at Haaland's revenue as a proportion to the global revenue. I've taken the 108 billion divided by the 1,960 billion, and that tells us that Haaland actually is only 5.5% of the global revenue. Again, further opportunities for Rodnim and expansion. And then coming on to Rodnim now in terms of a proportion of Haaland's actual fees and Haaland's actual revenue, we've only got that Rodnim's fee income in terms of Haaland itself is 2%, and in terms of the revenue is only 0.72. So that's looking at the 39 billion and the 108, and I'm sure you're telling me now, James, where's that 780 millions come from? That is the revenue that Rodnim has generated in 2003 on there. It's later on, I think, on page 10. The other areas just to consider are a potential merger or acquisition. We've got dominance of those established companies, opportunities like Rodnim to maybe differentiate and grow further. But the last thing that maybe you'd want to consider on here is that Boston Consulting matrix, where we have the Boston Consulting Group, shall I say, where we have low market share in terms of Rodnim and a high rate of growth. So that is the sort of question mark quadrant where you go, he's doing all right, but if we got a higher market share, that question mark quadrant would turn into a star on there. And again, a fantastic opportunity and company for the business to operate in. Well, that nicely takes us through our actual first part of my pre-scene analysis on there. If you'd like access to these notes, be sure to click in the description of this video where you can download a copy. Make sure you take advantage of those Astranti mock exams and the courses themselves, especially the pre-scene pack. There's so much information in there that will help you out. Make sure you subscribe so you get access to all the videos to help you pass your exam, and I'll see you on the other side now for part 2. So thank you very much.